Okay, welcome. I've been getting a lot of questions about how I set up a dynamic inking brush in Photoshop, so I thought I'd take you through the process and maybe show you how to set up an action so that Photoshop will do it for you automatically and you don't have to go the long way home every time. Just come over here to a blank file and we'll talk about paths and everything real quick. I'm going to make a new layer here, and I'm going to draw a couple of paths on here. Click and drag, click and drag. These are called Bezier curves, or it might be Bezier, and I guess only the inventor actually knows the true name. It's one of those words that everybody says their own way. And I'll make a second path here. Let's put some jaggy lines on there. We'll throw some curves at the end. This technique also works on your standard paths like your ellipse tool, your rounded rectangular tool. So let's put a circle in here and let's put a rounded rectangle on here. Alright, that's cool. Get rid of those. And first I'll show you how this works without the dynamic brush settings and the tapering and all that stuff set up on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my brush. My brush is set to 52. I mean, that'll be good for this. And I'm going to click on this path. Actually, I'm going to make a copy of it real quick. I think it might be better to show it to you that way. So I'm going to click on this path. So I held down the Alt key when I clicked on that path with the black arrow tool and just drug it up. That makes a copy of any path. Alright, so I'm going to click on this path. I'm going to right button click. I'm going to go stroke subpath. And it says subpath because you have more than one path on the screen. I'm going to set it to brush. I'm going to click OK. Photoshop just stroked this path with my brush settings of 52, and see it's got a consistent width and everything like that all along the line of the path. Now on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Window, Brush, and that's F5 on your keyboard. It opens up your brushes palette. I'm going to click on this path, and then I'm going to come over here. I have to have brush selected. And see this right here where it says Shape Dynamics? I'm going to click on that. And normally when I set these up, I do them at about 63 because I don't like the tapered edge to be too sharp, because then your inking will look kind of funny, like all your lines stop, like they don't flow together. But for the purposes of this demonstration right now, I'm going to set it down here somewhere like 30. That's good. So now, black arrow, I'm going to click on this other path. I'm going to say stroke subpath, and I want to stroke it with the brush. You see you have all these other different things that you can stroke a path with, but I'm going to stroke it with a brush, and it'll work with any brush that you have in Photoshop. So what it's going to do, it's going to use the current brush or the last brush that I used, and then I'm going to say simulate pressure here, and I'm going to say OK. And now you can see how those edges are tapered? There's much more character to this line than there is to this line. If you were to do your inking with the top line, it will look very generic. Whereas the second line, if you add some taper or a little dynamic brush settings, it's going to have a much more organic feel to it. It's going to look a lot more like you inked it with a brush, or like you inked it by hand. Over here on our palette, I can see that it's named path 1 because I clicked create a new path right here to start. Normally when you start, it's named work path. If your path is named something other than path 1, you can double click it. You can name it Fred, Sally. I don't know. I like path 1. Path 1. Path 1 is always my working path. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the same thing that we just did before, except for I'm going to record it as an action so that I don't have to do it over and over every time. You know, all that right button click and all that mess. We don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Windows, Actions. I'm going to create a new action. And actions are like macros in Microsoft or any other program, where it's going to record everything that I do after I hit the record button, and it's going to save it as just a set of instructions for Photoshop. Anytime I click this action, Photoshop is going to do that with the object that I have selected. So I'm going to set up a path action here. I'm going to call it Stroker. I'll set it to be in my default actions. Here's where you can assign it to a function key, and that's going to be important in a second. You can add, like, you can say, okay, if I hit Shift Control F2, do what I'm about to do. You can also assign a color to it if you like to work in button mode. I'm not a big fan of that though. So the actual drawing actions that I think I have a set of, I don't know, 7 or 8 of them. They're over here in the actions palette. Here they are, my drawing actions. And they will be available for download in the description of this video. So I named it Stroker. It's in my default actions, not setting up a function key or any of that stuff. And I'm going to hit record. I'm going to click on a current path. Once again, got to have multiple paths to set this up. So I'm going to click on a current path. I'm going to right button click on it. I'm going to stroke the subpath with my brush, which was set to 52, and I'm going to simulate pressure. And the pressure settings were on the brushes palette, F5, that we had at about 27. So, okay, there, stroked it, tapered the ends for me. Nice little thickness right here. That's actually kind of cool. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to click back on path 1. Now, this is important. It just recorded select current path right here for me. Previous versions of Photoshop didn't require you to have to come back over here and click on path 1. It would automatically keep your current path layer selected after any path operations, but they changed that for some reason, and I don't know, it broke my heart for about a month and a half, but I got it figured out. The other thing that I'm going to do here is sometimes I keep the paths and sometimes I don't. For the ones that I'm doing general inkings around, like contour lines and stuff, I don't save those paths because I don't need them again. So I might just go ahead here and hit delete and delete that path and make sure that path 1 is selected again. And now I'll hit stop. So that's kind of cool. So now to apply this, let's say I go to this, let's do the rounded rectangle here. Instead of having to go right button click, stroke subpath, brush settings, simulate pressure, delete my path, click back on path 1, now I can just come over here, I can click on Stroker, or if I've assigned it to a function key, like I do, you know, I might just hit F6, but I can come over here, I can click on Stroker, click play, and Photoshop just did that for me. It stroked that path right here using the brush settings that we had on the F5, and then it deleted it, and it also reselected path 1 for me. We'll do it again right here. Let's create a, let's create a new one here. We're going to create a new path or new action. I'm going to create new action. I'm going to call it Stroker no delete. Once again, I can assign it to any folder that I want. I can add it to a function key if I want. And I can also assign a color, but that's when you're working in button mode, and I don't do that, so I ain't gonna do it. All right, so stroker no delete, record. I'm gonna click on my path. I'm gonna right button click. I'm gonna stroke subpath. I'm gonna say brush, simulate pressure, because I want that tapered look. Okay, reselect path 1, and then I'm gonna click stop. So now what it's done is recorded all of the actions like the other one before, except for it's not going to delete my path when I'm done. And that's really, really helpful if you're doing rims or headlights or any of that stuff where you might want a consistent line. Now to show you the difference between the two, path 1 is selected. I've got this oval right here. I'll click on stroker and I'll click play. Notice it deleted the path. This time I'll click on this one, I'll click stroker no delete, and I'll click play. Does the same thing, maintains my path. That's all great. Now in my actions, let me go here to my drawing actions here, right here. In my drawing actions, there's a stroke with pressure, stroke with no pressure. There's a add 1 pixel, and that's assigned to a function key too. That's always very important. So if you have a selection, you can just click the F4 key if you have these actions, and it will expand your selection by 1 pixel. You don't have to go up here to the select menu and do that stuff. I have another one here that is hide paths, because sometimes you'll be working and you'll have all these paths on the screen. Well, I can just hit the F2 key and it hides my paths palette. Watch this. F2, they're gone. When I want them back, I just click on it. F2, they're out. So, and then I also have a make a selection, which is cool because any path that I have on here, and I'll show you that real quick. Any paths that I have on here, let's delete these guys. You know, let's say I drew some lines around here and this thing came here and this was the shape of a squid car. I can just click on this. It's assigned to the make selection is assigned to the F3 key. So instead of even having to come over here and click this and click play, I just hit F3 on my keyboard, and now that's a selection. And inside of that selection, I can, you know, I can airbrush. I can do whatever I want to do. I don't have to worry about it because all my paint is confined to that selection. So that's kind of cool. I have, let's do this, and let's make a new layer here. F2, I'm going to hide that. The next one that I have here is intersect with selection and subtract from selection. See the subtract from selection? That's pretty cool. So let's say I had an oval here and I had a rounded rectangle here. And this one was already selected. That's my F3. I can come right here and I can click my subtract from selection with this, which is Shift F3. And now it subtracted that rectangle from the circle for me. The reason I jumped back to path 1 is because normally path 1 is my working layer. So let me give you a quick practical application of all of this. We'll come over here to cap. And I'm going to use my actions, but I already showed you how to set one up. So I'm going to come here, zoom in. I don't even need to see that. I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to click my pen tool, and I'm going to set my brush to, you know, cartoons and stuff, the contour lines, I normally ink at about 7 or something like that, like about that thick. Maybe we'll make it just a little bit thicker for here. Okay, Well, let's make this blue. I'm gonna do Control U, colorize. I'm gonna make this kind of blue, push the saturation up, and then push the lightness up. That's gonna give me a blue line look on that. And then I'm gonna create a new layer above it, or F12. Once you download my actions, you'll be able to do that by pushing F12. That's cool. And I'm gonna click my pen tool. Yeah, I'm gonna click my pen tool. And let's say we start here. I'm gonna click here, click and drag, kind of follow the flow of the shape. I don't have to be too precise. This is a cool part right here though. In Illustrator, you can just click back on this point and it resets it for you. That's not the case in Photoshop. In Photoshop, you have to hold down the Alt key and you can click on this point and it sets your point back to there. So now that's where you're coming from. And that's very important because if I was, for example, out here, I click and I drag this little handle right here, but I wanted to come back in here and start, it's going to create that little dippy dip right there, and that is not cool. I don't want that. So I'm going to hit Alt, reset my point. I'm going to come around here, staying loose, come in here, do that, come in here, come around here, and come around here. And then my recorded action for stroking a path, and let me make sure it's named path 1, stroking a path and deleting the path that I just stroked is F6. So I hit F6 and there it goes. I got my tapered ends and that's great. I'm actually going to go to my brushes palette though, and I'm going to increase the size of that because that's a little too much taper. 60 is good. That's good. And let's come around here, pen tool, click, come all up in here. I'm going to give him a little dip right here just because that's always kind of cool. Always a little character. Come here. I'm going to alt click. I'm going to come up here. These are just the contour lines, so I don't even really have to be too precise on this. I'm just clicking and dragging all the way around. Got that. Reset my point with an alt. Come here. Come here. Move this over here. Let's run it up into here anyway, because I'm going to show you that real quick too. Then I'm going to push F6, which once again strokes with the brush pressure that I just set, which is great. But now here's the cool part. This is where the neat stuff comes in. So let me come around here and do this kind of just that line right there. So now on the interior pieces, I don't want them to be as thick as my contour lines. I want my contour lines thicker and my interior lines a little bit thinner, just because it adds more character. So I can click on B for brush, and instead of 9, I'm going to make those 5. And I reduce that just by hitting the bracket keys on my keyboard. The left bracket is smaller, the right bracket is bigger. So let's say we're going to do 5, and this is going to be kind of cool. So I will zoom in here a little bit so you can see this. I'm going to click on my pen tool. Now I'm going to come here. I'm going to come here. I'm going to come here. And I'm going to hit F6. Now it just stroked that path, but now the width of the brush was only 6 as opposed to 9. So now I have a thinner interior line. And that's great, especially for your cartoon stuff. I actually do employ it on the semi-real stuff that I do as well, but It's definitely great on the cartoons. That's great. I'm going to make a new layer above this one, which is F12, because I have an action to do that. I'm going to make an ellipse right here. I'm going to edit, transform my path, free transform, which is Control T. So now I can rotate it. Put that bad boy right there, that right there. If I hold Control, I can modify these individual points here. The edges, see that? That's cool. When you don't hold down Control, it's just going to be, I'll show you. The whole thing's going to move, and I don't want that. I only want, in this case, I only want to move this, and let's say I want to move this right here. So I kind of fit that on there. I'm going to do a Control C, which is copy, Control V, paste, Control T, transform. So now I'm transforming the copy of that path that I just made. I'll hold down Control here, lock that bad boy right down there. So once again, I get a little character in that. I'm going to take this outer line and I will stroke it instead of 5. Let's do 7 on that, F6. And on this one, let's stroke that at 4. Oops. On this one, so let me see if that works. 4. That's on a separate layer here. So then I can take my eraser, and since it falls underneath the I can delete that out. I can delete this out. And now let's zoom out. Now I can go through my entire drawing that way until I get to a point like this, where I have some slightly thicker lines on the outside, thinner stuff on the inside. I think for the more realistic drawings like this one, I think I did the outside at 4 or 5 and the inside was at 3. You want to stay right around 3 or maybe 2 at the most, because it'll disappear if you do it any worse than that. Anyway, that's about it. Once again, the actual drawing actions that I use will be as a link in the description of this video, so you can download them and you can use them, or you can create your own actions at this point and do your own inkings your own way. So, all right, there you go. Thanks. I'm out.